Welcome to our course on life groups. How did they start? How will they be managed? Why are we doing them at Sabao Church? In the year 2000, I started to notice that many people were coming to our church and had tremendous potential, and I asked myself what I could have them do. Not everyone could preach on Sundays or sing or, in short, do the Sunday gospel, but so many people had great potential. While praying during a conference, someone gave me a cassette tape, something people used to listen to sermons a long time ago. We're talking about the year 2000, and that cassette talked about having life groups. At the time, they called them cells. We changed this name precisely because of the times we live in, where the word cells is associated with terrorists, etc., and we called them life groups. A group for life, a group for sharing life. So in 2000, I started to study a bit about life groups. I went to Pastor Yonggi Cho's church, who was one of the first in recent history to form these small groups. He was very ill because he was doing everything by himself, and at a certain point after baptizing 200 people, this is what he told me himself. He realized he couldn't go on, and for the first time in history, he used people from his church to preach and help him. It was also the first church, by the way, to use women's ministry because they were the wives of entrepreneurs. And he created these small groups, taking inspiration from the Bible. We know that Moses was very tired because he listened to all the people all day, and his father-in-law Jethro came to him and said, "Look, if you keep doing this, you will wear yourself out and wear out the people as well." And he advised him to divide the people into small groups of 10, 50, 100, so that Moses could focus only on what was truly important and not on all the people. By doing this, he would place the burden, the responsibility of counseling and helping people grow into the hands of all the leaders of the tribes, and he himself would only take care of what he truly needed to handle, that is, only the extremely difficult cases. This principle has been passed down through time and history, so it wasn't just Moses who did this. Moses started doing this, but over time we see that some other churches have done the same. We see this, for example, with Jesus himself in the New Testament, when he had to distribute the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. He told them to sit on the ground and formed small groups. Because when there is so much multiplication, you need other people to help you manage this multiplication. And this is the principle behind life groups or cell groups. Pastor Yonggi Cho took up this idea, but he wasn't the first. Before him, there was John Wesley. John Wesley, during the revival in England, called them bands. And I don't know if you know this, but John Wesley actually started out in schools and universities, preaching in small groups, believing that the call to make disciples was not just an ecclesiastical calling, that is, for a pastor or a priest, but it was a calling for everyone. And when Jesus says to go into all the world and make disciples, he was speaking to everyone. So Yonggi Cho, building on everything he had already learned, began to reintroduce small groups in homes to the modern world, and his church exploded when he put the ministry into the hands of the people instead of keeping it in his own hands. This is a different characteristic from a church that simply has life groups or cells compared to a church that is actually a church in cells or within life groups. Life groups are the most important part of the church. And imagine that there is a big difference because a church that simply has life groups is a church focused on the Sunday gospel or Sunday service, and everything is centered around the pastor. The pastor does everything, manages everything, so the focus is on the pastor and a few people who work with the pastor. But the church itself is not that active. The church receives. Whereas a church founded on life groups means that the most important meeting isn't even the one on Sunday, but rather the most important meeting is the one held in homes. Obviously, this wasn't invented by Yonggi Cho, and we're not inventing it either, because this is the model of the New Testament church. There in Acts of the Apostles 2:42 and onward, we find exactly this model. It says that the church met in the temple and in homes. So the local church is very important. The Sunday gospel is very important. It's that meeting where we strengthen each other and grow together. But then after that, during the week, we go and truly work on people's lives. Imagine that in a small church, everyone knows each other, and this model can work. A group of people, the pastor, a small team managing the church. But now imagine a church of 3,000, 10,000. Instead, imagine multitudes coming to God, which is the goal, because we are called to go into all the world and make disciples. Actually, this word is a gerund. It's going, as in while we go. And we want big churches not just to have big churches, but to have more people saved. And the best way, the best strategy to truly care for people and give them attention is to actually transfer ministry from the hands of the pastor to the hands of the church. So the pastor, together with his team, in our case, the apostolic team, delegates to people, to ordinary believers, to do things, first of all, to reach their environment, the people. So there are four important points. The first is to win or reach the person for Jesus. The second is to consolidate, because maybe that person came one Sunday or attended a life group, but still doesn't really know Jesus. They've just taken the first step and accepted Jesus into their life. They've started, but there's a process. And then there's the process of consolidation. In our church, during the consolidation process, you will be assigned a person called a mentor. The mentor is the person who will introduce you to church life and also guide you into Christian life. They will teach you how to fast, how to pray, how to win over your family, and they will be like a best friend, like a spiritual father or mother who helps you grow. They don't necessarily have to be perfect people. I really like to think that in the past there were many parents who hadn't even studied, but they taught their children important principles and a serious moral way of life. Obviously, our mentors are well prepared, but that's not what we should focus on. Instead, it's about a life with God and the principles they will pass on to you and introduce you to in the Christian life. After you have consolidated someone, you move on to the third point, which is training, and this training will take place exactly within the life groups, where we will train people to first take care of one another. We will train people to preach, to manage, because in a large church you live of the ministry of the pastor. If the pastor is more of an evangelist, then he will motivate the church more in that direction. If he is more of an apostle, he will motivate the church more to conquer. If he is more of a prophet, he will focus more on the prophetic and so on. But within the life group, we can exercise all the ministries, and this is wonderful. The other way we train people is with the Bible Academy, which is a Bible school that will help people grow a lot in their knowledge of the Bible, because in discipleship, even though we help people, it is a more practical and convivial approach. Whereas in Bible school, you will also learn all the theory, which your mentor will then help you put into practice. The fourth point is to send. After you have won this person over, consolidated them, and trained them, you send them out. That person will also become a new life leader, meaning someone who will have other people at their home, disciples to train, to consolidate, and so on. And this person will also take part in the baptism, because when Jesus said to go into all the world, he also said that we would baptize people. He said, make disciples by baptizing them. In fact, baptism is not a certificate of now I am ready, but rather a certificate of I want to be a disciple of Jesus. And this will therefore be done by the mentor. From here also comes, so in 2000, after I had been asking this question and went to visit Yonggi Cho's church, I went to Colombia to visit the G12 church, which at that time had also started to do life groups, but with a difference. While for Yonggi Cho there was this, one person alone who took care of everyone, multiplied and continued to care for them, the G12 said yes, but there are so many people, sometimes we can't take care of so many, and they limited this group of people to 12. It doesn't really matter whether it's 12 or 15. What God revealed to Pastor Cesar Castellanos was that it was better to reduce the group of disciples, and this would be faster. In 2013, however, after our church was already structured with the life group, where I had trained my leaders for a year to get started, we instead had another upgrade. I was in a city called Santarem, and I saw that they used what is called MDA, the Apostolic Discipleship Method. And there I saw that in addition to a small group with Yonggi Cho, they started to bring back life groups or cells. Castellanos started saying, let's reduce the group of disciples to take better care of them. But there instead they realized, by looking at a course that wasn't even a Christian course, but a business and politics course, that when people were taught in a large group, leaders rarely emerged. But when you taught a small group, say a group of 10, one person from that small group would emerge as a good leader. However, they noticed that in the world of politics or business, If you always kept someone by your side, 10 out of 10 of those people would become leaders. And so they adopted this approach, the mentorship model, which we have also adopted. So we have both life groups, not huge groups, but groups of about 8 to a maximum of 20 people. It also depends on the house and on who is leading the group without a set number. And within the life group, the life leader basically chooses 2 or 3 people to train and mentor. These are the people who will multiply, because the word cell that Yonggi Cho used actually comes from biology. What do cells do in biology? They divide in order to multiply, and that's where the name comes from. So the principle remains. We don't actually divide, we multiply, and that's what we use. We don't say, oh, we have to split up, but rather we have to multiply, because that's really the principle. And that person will be trained. What is the purpose of this group? So it's a group where we train disciples to be disciples. We take better care of people in a very specific way, one-on-one. It's a group where people will grow spiritually, so they'll grow in their prayer life, in their personal lives, they'll grow in their knowledge of the Bible. But above all, the purpose of life groups is not to hold a Bible study group or a soul care group. It's about relationships. It's about creating close discipleship relationships within a huge church, so that together we can win the world for Jesus.